Just days before leaving office, Mike Pompeo, the outgoing US Secretary of State under the Trump administration, formally determined that China was committing genocide against the country's Uyghur Muslims, a view also shared by the new Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. However, the use of the term genocide is far from universally accepted. Aside from the strong opposition to such claims from the Chinese government, it's also been questioned by prominent Western observers. So what exactly is genocide, and do China's actions in Xinjiang really appear to qualify? Hello and welcome. If you're new, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, and the origins of countries. Over the course of the last century, the term genocide, a term first formally coined by the Polish lawyer Raphael Lemkin, has entered the language of international politics. However, there's a tendency to think of it in rather narrow terms. Most people usually will associate it with mass killings, such as the Ottoman genocide against the Armenians, the Nazi Holocaust against Jews and Roma, and the genocide of Tutsis in Rwanda, to name just some of the most prominent examples from the past century or so. In truth, though, genocide is actually understood more broadly than this. The key reference point for any understanding of the term is the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, unanimously passed by the United Nations General Assembly on the 9th of December 1948, and now has 152 state parties around the world, including all 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. Interestingly, the 42 UN members that haven't signed the convention include Indonesia, Somalia, Kenya, Myanmar, and Japan. According to the convention, genocide is actually defined as any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. In this sense, genocide extends well beyond systematic murder. Instead, the term needs to be understood as a deliberate attempt to eradicate the existence of a group, not only by targeted killing, but also by other actions designed to meet this goal. The definition of genocide has recently come to the forefront of international politics, with increasingly loud claims that China is committing genocide against the Muslim Uyghur population in the province of Xinjiang. However, while there's now little doubt in many policy circles that mass human rights abuses are taking place in the region, the use of the term genocide has proven to be extremely controversial. So, is there a case to argue that China's actions against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang can and should really be considered as genocide? Xinjiang, more properly the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, is the largest of China's official 34 top-level administrative divisions and is one of the country's 5 autonomous regions. Lying in the far northwest of the country, it borders 8 countries: Mongolia, Russia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and the 3 Central Asian republics of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. According to the most recent estimates, the population in the region is around 25 million, although the exact figure is contested. The largest community are the ethnic Uyghurs. Thought to number around 11 to 12 million, they're now believed to make up between 45 to 50% of the population. Predominantly Muslim, they speak a Turkic language and share much in common with the peoples in the neighbouring Central Asian republics. The next largest group are the ethnic Han Chinese. They're now thought to make up around 40% of the population. The remaining 10 to 15% is made up of Kazakhs, Hui, a Chinese Muslim community, and other smaller ethnic groups, including Mongolians and Russians. Xinjiang has an extremely long and rich history, forming a key part of the Silk Road, the ancient trade route that linked China with the Middle East and Europe. This meant that while the region has come under Chinese control at various points over the past 2,000 years, other influences have also been felt. Most notably, in the 9th and 10th centuries, Islam arrived in the region and soon started to gain converts. For our purposes, the story really begins in the 1870s and 1880s, when East Turkestan, the area now known as Xinjiang, formally came under the authority of the Chinese state. Although the region experienced a number of uprisings in the years that followed, the advent of the Chinese Civil War in 1927 saw two separate attempts to create an independent East Turkestan Republic. The first of these was proclaimed in 1933 in the far west of the region on the border with British India, Afghanistan and Tajikistan. This proved to be short-lived, coming to an end the following year when the region was overrun by forces loyal to the nationalist Chinese government. The second was proclaimed further north in 1944 on the border of Mongolia and what is today Kazakhstan, then part of the Soviet Union, which supported the move. However, the final victory of the Chinese Communist Party in 1949 put an end to the nascent state and Chinese rule was reasserted over the entire territory. In 1955, Xinjiang officially became an autonomous region of the People's Republic of China. Over the following years, and despite the claim to Uyghur autonomy proclaimed in the region's title, the Chinese government pursued a policy of Sinicization, and increasing numbers of ethnic Han Chinese began to settle in the resource-rich region. This would have severe consequences for the Uyghurs, especially during the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s and 70s, which saw a concerted effort to rid the region of its Islamic influences. While the 1980s and 90s saw a resurgence of the region's Islamic identity, it did so against a backdrop of growing inequality and tensions between the Uyghurs and the Han Chinese. Amidst claims of widespread economic discrimination and religious persecution, this led to rising unrest, including terrorist attacks, rioting, and attacks on ethnic Chinese. Particularly serious outbreaks of violence in 1990, 1997 and 2009 were met with a harsh response by the Chinese authority, including mass arrests and executions. The current allegations of genocide relate to the most recent efforts to rein in rising discontent in Xinjiang. As well as a significant increase in surveillance and growing police numbers, in 2014, reports started to emerge that the Chinese government was trying to tackle dissent by re-educating the Uyghur population. This included forcing people to renounce Islam and profess their loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party. However, concerns really began to grow when, in 2017 and 2018, satellite imagery showed the construction or expansion of what appeared to be camps across Xinjiang. From early on, the Chinese government acknowledged their existence, but insisted that they were educational establishments. The students, as it called them, were there of their own volition. But this was heavily contested by dissidents who insisted that they were in fact internment camps and that the detainees were subjected to forced labour, starvation, torture and widespread sexual abuse. Meanwhile, the sheer scale of the camps has become clearer. Although the exact figure is unknown, it's now increasingly accepted that as many as 1 million Uyghurs have been through them. On top of this, allegations of systematic human rights abuses across Xinjiang have also emerged. These include claims of ongoing extrajudicial detentions and killings and the destruction of cultural heritage. More recently, there have also been claims that China is removing children from families and pursuing forced abortions and sterilisation of Uyghur women. For its part, the Chinese government strongly denies the claims, accusing various groups of lying. In February 2021, it banned the BBC over its reporting of the abuses. That said, the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. was served with a Twitter ban in January 2021 for posting a message in which it openly appeared to acknowledge its policies to reduce the Uyghur population, arguing that its efforts to eradicate extremism means that Uyghur women were no longer baby-making machines. Needless to say, these reports have been greeted with growing international alarm. Western countries are increasingly calling on China to respect human rights and allow the UN Commissioner on Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, to visit Xinjiang and see the situation for herself, a request that China has steadfastly refused to accept. Meanwhile, many leading news organisations and non-governmental bodies have come to the conclusion that the sheer scale of the abuses and the fact that they are systematically aimed at the Uyghur population means that China is now engaged in a deliberate policy of genocide. It was this claim that was levelled by the United States and which was again refuted by China, which called them outrageous lies. Nevertheless, the evidence continues to grow. In February 2021, a group of British barristers working on the instruction of the World Uyghur Congress and the Uyghur Human Rights Project, but acting independently and without payment from the groups, produced a 100-page formal legal opinion on the human rights abuses in China. This found that there is very credible case that China is in fact carrying out the crime of genocide. So, if it seems to be the case that genocide is being carried out, why is there such a reluctance to use the term? There are several reasons. In part, it's driven by political and legal factors. China is obviously a significant international actor, and many countries simply don't want to antagonize Beijing by applying such a serious term to its actions in Xinjiang. But there's more to it than that. Some leaders, such as Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, have argued that the term is indeed so significant and carries such heavy political and potentially legal implications that it shouldn't be used lightly. A proper investigation needs to take place before a label of genocide should be applied. But perhaps most importantly, it's also important to understand that the Genocide Convention obliges states to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. By calling it a genocide, states would then be required to act. But the problem also seems to be centred on the word itself, which many now directly and solely associate with the act of systematic mass killing. This was exemplified by a leader column in The Economist, which denied that China could be committing genocide on the grounds that, just as homicide means killing a person and suicide means killing yourself, genocide means killing a people. China's persecution of the Uyghurs is horrific. It has locked up perhaps 1 million of them in prison camps, which it naturally mislabels vocational training centres. It has forcibly sterilised some Uyghur women, but it's not slaughtering them. In fact, and as shown, according to the Genocide Convention, these actions would most certainly meet the definitions of genocide. An accusation of genocide is perhaps the most serious allegation that can be levelled against a state. Indeed, the crime is so serious that it shouldn't be used lightly or debased, especially given the legal implications it imposes. But equally, it shouldn't be applied too narrowly, either out of error or political calculation. The idea that genocide can simply be defined in terms of a policy of mass murder as seen during the Holocaust represents a very limited reading of the term. In its most extreme form, genocide is indeed marked by wholesale killing. But the term also needs to be understood in the full scope of its meaning. The 1948 UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide is absolutely clear that the definition of the term extends beyond mass murder. In this sense, the argument that China cannot be committing genocide because it's not carrying out mass executions is flawed and either deliberately or unintentionally misrepresents the term genocide as understood in international law. Instead, any assessment needs to be made on the basis of the Genocide Convention. This clearly laid down a range of actions that constitute genocide. These include inflicting physical and mental harm, imposing harsh conditions, preventing births, and removing children from a group. If the Genocide Convention is to have any meaning, these are the standards against which Beijing's policies against the Uyghur in Xinjiang need to be properly investigated and assessed. The problem is that this broader reading carries serious political and legal implications that many states will want to avoid if at all possible. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find interesting. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.